Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I'm your host, the Football Grump. With me, as always, is Mike, the Cranky Fan, and we are back for another summer episode. I'm fresh off of jumping on Talking Giants at the end of last week, where I was wearing this exact same shirt. Had to fill in for Bobby, who is traveling abroad, and had a really, really good conversation with Justin. But I am very excited to be back with my co-host, Cranky Fan, to talk some Giants football. What's going on?
You know, looking at the video for Talking Giants, there really isn't much of a polar opposite in physical appearance from Bobby, who's like 6'12", and then Mike, who's the Grump, who's about, I don't know,
5'12".
Yeah, dripping wet, 150 pounds. So
yeah,
that's good to be joined up again. I apologize in advance. For some reason, my voice is shot. I mean, I'm not sick. I just woke up and I sound like a Muppet. So you're gonna have to deal with me a little bit today on this one.
Well,
the mind is sharp. The vocal cords are shot.
But the body is weak.
Yeah, there is a limerick that Tom Cruise did in Cocktail about the body being shot, which I don't remember, and we'll do a movie review of Cocktail at some point.
I was gonna say most people don't even know Cocktail.
Well, if you don't, go educate yourselves. It's one of the great Tom Cruise.
It's one of his first ones, right?
No. That was kind of after. It was after he did Top Gun. He made 3 movies were basically the same plot, but it's Top Gun working in a bar, Top Gun as a NASCAR driver. You know, the same story arc, and him just smiling and being charming, and getting the hot girl. So
the life.
We spent way too much time talking about Cocktail.
So speaking of cocktails, you and I had a cocktail this weekend together. So it's not like I've missed you too much, which is good.
Yeah.
And speaking of not missing anybody, let's lead with the biggest news here. Darren Waller has officially announced his retirement. Long-awaited announcement. I think I tweeted the exact opposite of what I meant to say about this, but
good job.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's because I used a double negative in it, and I sat there and I stared at it and I was like, yep, that's right. And then I looked at it 3 days later after reading people's comments, and I'm like, that's the exact opposite of what I meant. We all saw this coming, right? Like, the majority of us thought, once we started hearing rumblings of his retirement, and then we saw the divorce, and then the Giants had no contact with him, only his agent. At that point, most of us agreed this is probably happening, right?
I never thought for 1 second he was coming back when all this stuff started. It just seemed, the entire time he was a Giant just seemed like it was just anticipation and waiting around. Like, doesn't it? Like, we saw him in training camp. We went to camp that one day and we were like, wow, this guy might be the best guy on the field, period. And I feel like the highlight of his Giant career, I don't care what his numbers were or his impact was that day in practice, because it was the anticipation that we have a potential wide receiver 1, never mind a tight end 1. So, at some point where, we knew the injury potential was there for him. He was in and out of the lineup. And then all this started. It was just kind of like, all right, we're moving on. I've moved on from him. So the news was anticlimactic from my standpoint.
Darren Waller's time here was anticlimactic. The season was anticlimactic. His impact on the season, all of it was anticlimactic. I mean, it was a ton of build-up for what was a bad season for a myriad of reasons. But I do want to go into one thing. I'm not going to lie and say I wasn't excited for Darren Waller and what his impact could have been for the offense, because I definitely was, especially when we saw it in training camp. He was like almost unguardable. Even in that preseason, the one series, I know it's one series and I know it's preseason, but like that was supposed to be the dress rehearsal series and it looked flawless. As a general rule, and I think that if you listen to everything that we've said on this podcast and all of our draft coverage throughout the entirety of our time doing this since 2017, I'm just not a huge fan of the tight end receiving mismatch guy. Like, it's so easy to get enticed by the next Jimmy Graham, but they just never really seem to pan out. Like, they never seem to have the impact that they're supposed to have. They're always injured. There's always something. It just never. And I'm not saying like Travis Kelce isn't that guy. You know what I mean? Like right now, I'd say maybe Kyle Pitts is kind of that guy.
And honestly, Kyle Pitts is still a potential guy. I
Sure.
mean, from what he was at Florida to what, you can put a highlight package of like his best games in 2020, and that's better than everything combined we've seen in his career with the Falcons.
But don't. I mean, I assume that some of that is just the step up to the NFL and the change in the game. Like, defenses are just kind of ready for guys like that. But also, I think that'll change with Kirk Cousins at the helm.
Yeah, but if you're that good, supposedly, Redsley coming in, and you're getting drafted that high as a tight end, you're expected to be a major, major impact, regardless of who your quarterback is. And he just hasn't been. And there's lots of reasons why. And this is not, the Talking Falcons show, but you're right. It's hard to say you're going to be that guy unless you really are that guy. And there's very few of that guy in this league.
But college football produces far more types of that guy than they do Jeremy Shockey or yeah, not even Jeremy Shockey. I'm picking like a relatable giant, whatever. But like even your run of the mill, Caden Smith, Daniel Bellinger, like these Y tight ends, the guys who do play the entire position and they line up in line and they block reliably. There's just a lot less of them, and so I get excited for Daniel Bellinger more than I do. I just think it affects your overall offense far more. Now, if Darren Waller lived up to the billing, obviously that changes everything. But I still feel like at some point your running game is suffering because, you just don't have that extra blocking element, or God forbid one of your tackles is playing but nursing a leg injury and they just don't have the fast step out of their stance. You could use some chip help, and like a guy like Evan Ingram is useless.
Or it's one less thing opposing defenses have to worry about, which is almost as important as actually the execution on the field. They're spending less time preparing for something that's just not there.
We talk all the time about how much more you have to do defensive or just study in general when guys are versatile, when they can be moved around, when they can play in multiple spots and do multiple things. The more you can do, the more you have to game plan for. And it's not that hard to just be like, you know what, we're going to have to bracket Darren Waller. We're just going to have to put two guys on him. Like, it's not an ideal solution to have to tie two guys to a guy. You know what I mean? But it's not it's not like you can't work around something like that. Like,
go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, like, obviously the obvious counter to that is like, well, you can't double everybody. It's like, yeah, but you don't need to unless you have a fully complete team that requires a double team on everyone. So a guy like Darren Waller would help a rebuilding team, but he's not going to reach his full potential of who he is unless he's on a team that is already competing.
Exactly. Yeah. And, he just looked at everything, and, it's tough to give up money, a lot of money, but, he's also had a guy who's had a lot of, he's lived a life already.
Yes.
And he's lived an experience that most of us have not. And, it's a different perspective than we do. It's easy for us to say, take the money, or you're playing a game, a kid's game. But no, these guys are adults. They're professionals. They are, have families. They have all these different things. And, playing football may not be the number one. We don't know what's going on in his head right now and what's going on in his situation. I don't care what videos he makes and songs and all that stuff. We're not living in his shoes. So and this is a very difficult sport. It's a very violent sport. And if you are not committing 150% on every rep in OTAs, much less in a game, you could be jeopardizing your life. And I think he made the right move. If he's not into it, maybe after a year he may change his mind, and that's fine. But I think it's best for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, this is the same argument that we had with Nate Solder, where, he openly admitted, it's like, yeah, I have not been working out to football shape. And, 40 years ago when you had 3-a-days in training camp, nobody worked out in the offseason.
Exactly.
So that was the point of 3-a-days. But now, the modern NFL, these guys work out year-round. So if you are not 150%, like you said, if you're sitting around in June, you're behind. That's just, it is what it is.
Physically and mentally.
So I'm going to ask you a Darren Waller related question, and then let's get into the impact of this retirement. So,
Sure.
could you foresee Darren Waller coming out of retirement in a year or two for another year? Okay, I could too. Yeah.
100% good.
It seems like a lot of this has to do with maybe an injury, maybe a divorce, maybe just some, wavering with, other health issues that might be involved that could all be cleared up in 2 years when he's still young.
Competitors are competitors.
Right.
And as soon as you're not competing anymore, you miss it. And we've seen a million players, coaches, you name it, who, as soon as that competitive juices aren't flowing, they're sitting on the couch eating bonbons. They're like, what the hell did I do? And they want to prove it to themselves. And competing against themselves, that they can still do it as much as against others. So I'm almost fully expecting that at least someone will at least kick the tires on him next year if he doesn't decide unilaterally, I'm going to try to come back in the league.
Now let's get to the impact here. The Giants are going to get $6 million, something like that, somewhere around $11.5 million as a result of this retirement.
Roughly, yeah.
I had this conversation with Justin on Talking Giants. Most of this episode is stuff that I talked about with Justin. So if you're interested in that, head over to Talking Giants. But I really want Cranky's opinion. I mean,
sure.
Okay, I'm gonna keep my answers relatively brief on this show because I feel like I've already said it on a very popular show, but you haven't said yours. So, what does Cranky Fan want to do with $11.6 million this year?
Well, I think there's two things that I look at this for, and this is looking at maybe a realist, and this may not be something that a lot of people on this show want to hear. I think that we kind of need to be looking at the future as opposed to this year. And unless somebody falls out of the sky, like a starting cornerback that will make a real impact on this team, I think we are best served keeping the money in case of a rainy day, because this team has had not just rainy days come, but monsoons and hurricanes come where we need to get bodies in here and not people literally off the street. So I would keep that money for the rainy day when it does happen, and I would roll it over to next year because now that basketball's over and hockey's over, and my Rays are in last place. Oh God, I'm making myself sick already. But my attention is getting more and more towards this upcoming Giants and Gator season, and I look at this Giant roster and I'm looking at everything, and I'm not booking my flights for the Super Bowl next year. I'm not really booking my flights for a lot of January games coming up. I'm kind of looking at this as we are still in the rebuild. We don't like it, but that's the fact. And I don't think it makes sense to throw good money after the 2024 potential bad money. So to me, unless something like I said, a CB1 or a CB2 falls out of the sky and we can get him, I think I'd rather just roll that money over for next year. And when we will know at this time next year what we're doing with our quarterback. We will know at this time next year what we're doing with Evan Ingram. We will know next year the fate of, for sure is, and I'm not saying they're on hot seats, but we will know for sure the direction we're going to go with this GM and the head coach. I think that's better a time to spend that money as opposed to quick fixes that really may not last to much of anything this year.
Yeah, and Stephon Gilmore is sitting out there as a bona fide starting corner in the NFL that you could probably swallow, $8 million right there by sinking it into him. I don't think I'm gonna do that. Unless like Adoree Jackson got cut by the Titans and everyone on the universe was like, what the hell is going on in Tennessee? This is a very young, very good corner. Something's not right. Unless something like that happens, I don't like Stephon Gilmore's up there in age. That would be a panic. We don't have a corner two on the roster, kind of move.
Well, let's look at it also from Gilmore's perspective too.
Like, why would he?
Like, other than the money, what do we really offer a guy like him right now?
I agree. I mean, and this goes back to my whole expectations of this season, what my goal was this season, going back to draft talk. The idea right now needs to be this team doesn't score points. We need to score points. I'm aware that the defense looks like shit. I love defense. I'm a defense first guy. But that just like the way I see the modern NFL is if you have a juggernaut offense, that's where the defensive players sign. They go like you can build a defense almost overnight, it seems like, when you have a good offense that has promise and sustained success for years.
And you know what really helps a defense too? A good offense.
An offense that scores points.
A defense that isn't always starting on their 45-yard line. A defense that has to start up in the other team's red zone because of a turnover or a fumble or just a 3-and-out or incompetence. Scoring points makes you more aggressive, makes you a better defense.
It makes playing defense even easier. Look at that Buccaneers team that won the Super Bowl when Tom Brady was there. That secondary was a bunch of young, unproven guys. You had a good defensive coordinator in Todd Bowles, and you had an offense that scored points. When all you have to do on defense is be like, look, they're behind by 2 scores. They're throwing the ball. It makes your job so much easier, and it makes when an offense gets desperate, they get desperate. Playing defense is much, much easier. So yeah, to me, what I'd like to do with this $11 million, I am still not feeling comfortable with a backup tackle on the left side. I like Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle better than Evan Neal right now. But right now, I look at it and I'm like, all right, there's 2 right tackles on the roster. I'm okay with right tackle. But if Andrew Thomas misses any time, I still don't know who's playing that spot. And he doesn't have to be the best tackle in the world, but I think that whether it happens now or it happens on cutdown day with surprise cutdowns or the second wave of free agency or whatever, they should be finding a swing tackle, a backup tackle, someone that will fill in.
And you can trust.
Yeah, and I know they have $11.5 million. They don't need to spend all that. Just get that one thing and then save the money for the rest of the year for when you need to fill patches, and just like you said, whatever you don't spend, roll it into next year and continue building this team. Eventually, you're going to need to figure out what you're doing with Daniel Jones, like you said. And more money comes off the cap if he gets cut at the end of this year. But, if for whatever reason they are deciding to hold on to Daniel Jones next year, you're going to need that cap money. So, I agree.
I want to look at this a little different way, too, is what do we think the Giants are going to do with that money, and what will that tell us? Because that's like my brain instantly went to, this is going to be the canary in the coal mine, where if they decide to not do anything, that tells me that this, front office doesn't think much of this year, right? And maybe that's they have a more realistic approach, or they don't.
I don't know,
or is pressured even to do it.
I don't know if that really is that much of an indicator, because they right now have no money. So it's a perfectly valid solution, even if there are holes in the roster or whatever, that unless you really think you're winning a Super Bowl, which we all agree, we know the Giants don't think that they're in competition for a Super Bowl, you would just save this money because you just need this money for maneuverability over the course of a 17-game regular season.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like a temperature check of just their cautious level versus going for it, because it's maybe a better temperature check on where they feel, how strong they feel in their jobs.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's one of those things that they're starting to feel a little heat, maybe not from the media or from the fans, but from the mayors potentially. We don't know, probably not, but maybe.
Right.
They may be trying to do step C before they do step B, and that might be trying to make some moves that may not be in the longer term interest of this team. So I think it's going to be, I'm interested to see what they do. And then of course we're going to kind of look into it and be like, well, what does it mean?
What I think they'll probably do is I don't think that they're going to go out there and get a big name and spend a lot of the money in one shot. I could see them signing multiple people. But those I wouldn't call them camp bodies, but I call them roster depth. They need depth. I could see 2 or 3 guys, somebody in the secondary, somebody in the defensive line, somebody in the offensive line. These are all little spots. I could see them making small moves for depth, but but it's not like they have $10 million and then they got 11.5 because this guy retired.
Right.
They had almost nothing, and then they got $10 million is usually the kind of breathing room that you go into a season with anyway. So
Right.
I just don't see them spending a giant chunk of this. Again, unless there's some massive surprise, a 25-year-old star cornerback gets cut for some weird reason, then suddenly, barring something like that, I don't think they're spending all of it.
I don't think so either. I agree.
The other topic that we discussed with that I discussed with Justin, and I didn't really have a good answer for this, so I'll maintain that. But I want to know your thoughts. I wonder how much the offense changes simply by the absence of Saquon Barkley. Like how much does having your quote unquote best player on offense be a running back? Like, how does that affect how you call plays? How does it affect how you run an offense versus if you had built the roster yourself and never drafted the guy? You know what I mean? Like, all of these things are, I would assume factors on game day or before game day, going into like how you craft an offense and all this other stuff. Now he's not here. They made a calculated decision not to retain him at the number he requested or wanted. And they went out and they got a guy they're already comfortable with, Devin Singletary, former Buffalo Bill, a draft pick of Brandon Beane. I don't know. What do you think? Like, how much does that departure change what you do with the offense?
I don't think as much as you think for a few reasons. One, how many games did we actually have the ideal offense in place? The ideal offense meaning Daniel Jones is my quarterback, Andrew Thomas is my left tackle, Saquon Barkley is my running back, Darren Waller is my tight end, and any combination of who the wide receivers were. Hardly ever.
In
So
2023, but in 2022, if you nixed out Darren Waller, everyone was fairly healthy.
okay, but that's also a year plus away.
I get it.
Things have changed. So we were going on, almost a year of, almost every week there was a different combination of who is available, who is, running my offense, all these different things. So I don't think, you know, even when Saquon Barkley was playing, again, a lot of the time, if you didn't have Andrew Thomas or, Evan Neal was struggling or something, that you weren't really, the car wasn't being run with, maximum efficiency and, with the right gas anyway. So I don't think it's all of a sudden, we have to rebuild everything because he's gone, because they've been kind of, jerry rigging it for the last year plus anyway. I think if anything, maybe there's a little more of what they ultimately want to do. You said, they didn't draft Barkley, so they kind of were inherited Barkley. When you have a weapon that you inherit, you have to kind of make sure that that peg fits into your hole. Now it could be a little more, this is really what I want to do. So I think you might see more of a pure version of what they want to do. Now I don't know if that makes them a better offense or not, but you know, coaches coach and coaches have philosophies and coaches, they want to execute their plans. And I think now they can execute fully what they want to without, well, I have this, I need to use this too.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because you've taken my argument and flipped it around. So you used the exact same evidence that I did, and you made a totally different argument out of it. Mm-hmm. Your argument is if everything was broken anyway, then they were just, we don't really have an idea of what it was that they were aiming for to begin with.
That's kind of how I felt watching for the last year plus. Yeah. It was like, what? And I get it. It's not their.
You're not wrong.
Yeah,
but
like you can tell me the 2023 Giants offense was X, and I'd say like,
if
well,
you say
so.
On the week. Yeah. On the week. But see, my point is every time that there was something wrong, Andrew Thomas was hurt. Evan Neal is struggling. Darius Slayton has a hamstring thing, or Jalen Hyatt's not ready yet, or Wan'Dale Robinson is nursing the ACL still. No matter what the problem was, it always felt like on game day, the solution was always the same. And, maybe this is just me as a fan, and I'm not looking at it objectively, and I'm not looking at notes, but it feels like every week for the last 2 years, the game plan is they're just going to have to find a way to get Saquon Barkley the ball. Am I wrong?
No.
That seems like what every beat reporter said, what every analyst said. Like, if they're going to want to win this game, they're going to have to get the ball in the best playmaker's hands, and that's Saquon Barkley. It's just like,
well,
that's just not an option anymore.
I'm going to file it under no fucking shit.
Okay.
I mean, really, duh. That is lazy journalism. That is like, again, like when you listen, like I use this analogy all the time. If you listen to the Giant podcast and you read a lot during the week and you really consider yourself kind of learning about the Giants and know all the ins and outs, and then you get to Sunday, the 5 minutes before the game starts, what are the keys to the game, Joe? Well, score more points than them. Get the ball into Saquon Barkley's hands. No fucking shit. And that's kind of like, yeah, no kidding, but it's more to it than that. I I don't know. As much as we all love Saquon Barkley, a number one best player in your team running back does not have the potential for the explosive quick score as having the number one player be a wide receiver.
Not like in college. In college, it's a real thing.
Right. But in the NFL, so many things have to work for, a toss sweep to the outside for Saquon Barkley to go 80 yards, or a little pitch in the flat to him, setting up a simple screen and he goes 80 yards. This league is not, it's moving away and away from first down, first down, first down, first down, first down. It's the team that scores, the 25-yard touchdown, the 40-yard touchdown, the quick play. They score in bunches really fast. That's what successful offenses are. That's what the good teams do. And, as much as Barkley is a weapon as a wide receiver, he simply just couldn't be counted on every single week of a year to be the guy who's going to carry the ball 30 times, get 150 yards, and one of those plays be a 65-yard touchdown run. It's not him, and that's not what the league is anymore. So, yeah, the offense is going to have to change, but I think it actually makes us more modern and makes us the potential to be an offense that's going to carry its weight on this team.
All right. Yeah. And one of the other things that he never was, by the way, that definitely inhibits his playing ability is a pass blocker.
That too.
So it's just another thing that like changes what you can and can't do with him on the field.
On a team that's had offensive line woes from either availability or ability or experience, it'd be nice to have, again, when we had Waller also, it's like that guy's going out for passes. So you're losing the guy on the outside to block. We have Saquon Barkley, who's not very good or not willing to be a pass blocker inside. That's another guy we don't have. So it's not just that our offensive line sucked. It was they were getting no support around it either.
Correct.
On a down in, down out basis.
Wow. That was a very good answer. I'm really interested. That's something that I am interested to see, and I'm not sure. That might be like a bye week project where I take a look at what the offense is for the first half of the year and look at how it stacks up in the way they call plays versus 2022 and 2023, and think about that.
Up until Daniel Jones gets hurt, because then when you start throwing in the Tyrod Taylors and the DeVitos, then it's just don't get killed and hold on to the ball. That's your priority one.
And also, here's one other thing. It won't be detrimental, like this catastrophic thing, when the starting running back has an ankle injury or something. Like, if Devin Singletary has to miss, like, 4 games, I don't think I'm going to be, like, groaning, like, oh, now we're definitely going to lose. You know what I mean?
Well, 2 things for that. One, on the positive, we have the semblance now of a wide receiver room with the real potential of a number one and some depth behind him that you can have quality 2s. And 2, that also depends on how upright Daniel Jones is this year. If Daniel Jones is healthy, forget even being good, just being healthy, I'm not as worried if Singletary goes down. If again we have another one of these seasons where, what's with the neck, what's with the knee, what's with his uterus, I don't know, whatever, then it's like we have to have a running game, and if he's gone, then we're screwed again. So
you mentioned
that'll be the last time I ever mentioned Daniel Jones' uterus on this program.
Thank you.
I promise.
What is it, your period? You mentioned the wide receiver room. one of the things Justin and I talked about was very topical at that time, Thursday night, was right after Malik Neighbors had kind of a very, very good practice. OTAs are OTAs, but I think that was one practice where the balls weren't placed directly in his hands. He had to kind of twist his body around. He had to contort. He had to high point things. And he's as billed, it looks like. In June, he is doing all the things that it was promised that he could do. And, beat reporters got really jazzed about that. And I understand it's been a while since this team had a wide receiver that is in the conversation as being something the league is envious of, right? That being said, it is June. So I kind of fall right in the middle on this. It's okay to get excited about what you're seeing in June from Malik Neighbors. And the reason is because if he is going to be a star, these are the things that usually start that precede, a guy being very good in games is being very good in practice. That's just obvious. But it's okay to temper your enthusiasm and say that most of this was in May, and in early June, they're wearing shorts, and he's doing things that wide receivers do at every level in practice, in high school and in college, in the NFL. They run routes in practice and they catch balls. That's most of what's happening here. It's not too complicated, but I try to liken this to Kadarius Toney showing up to OTAs and rookie minicamp, and his shoes don't fit. In a vacuum, in and of itself, that means very, very little. So there's a thing, he didn't work out, it doesn't matter, it's not mandatory, he showed up at least, whatever, right? But over the course of a much bigger picture, if there are a lot more instances like this, then it means something more than nothing, right? Like, this was an indicator that this guy's a pain in the ass. Just flip it around. Now Malik Neighbors, you can look at this and be like, this is an indicator that he could be very, very, very good. But on its own, this doesn't mean anything.
First impressions and cruise ships, they don't turn on dimes. And, this is getting into middle of June. This is narrative season. Every team wins the offseason. The Cowboys more than others, but this is where you want to build your narrative based off of a first impression to get your fan base excited, the local media excited, the team excited. We're talking about this a year that's just a lost year, but the guys in that building don't look at it that way. They're competitors. They're looking to win. So if you can showcase your number one receiver, and fortunately for Neighbors, this was a draft pick that the majority of the fan base was into and excited about. This wasn't a year where, why did we reach for Daniel Jones? I didn't want him in the first place. Or, I wanted an offensive tackle and you drafted a secondary guy or something, whatever. He had, from the second his name was announced, the fans on his side. And the media getting excited, that's great. We're building context. We're building a narrative for, and building goodwill. So if he struggles to begin in the beginning, it's just like, well, we're still excited about him. We know the potential for it. Having said that, that's all this really is right now. This is, this has been going on for 120 years. This has been going on since Grantland Rice wrote about the Four Horsemen. This has been going on, since they wrote about the Seven Blocks of Granite. This is, Galloping Ghost. It's teams use the media to build larger than life people that people get excited about and want to pay money to buy tickets and to watch games on TV. It's great that he looked good in a random catch. Does it change my thoughts about it, whether he's going to be an all rookie receiver or an all pro or catch 130 yards? Nope. It has to happen in games. But it's also not kind of validating my thought about the draft pick. It's like, yeah, but let's see it. But Kadarius Toney was pissing against the wind the entire time he was here. Daniel Jones, for the majority of the time of the year, is pissing against the wind. Malik Neighbors is pissing with the wind, and he's leaking 500 yards with his pisses right now, and that's good. And that's the best you can hope for right now for these guys as they're running around in their jockey shorts and helmets. When we get into live bullets happening in September, none of this is going to mean anything. Like, and if he starts dropping passes or can't get open or anything, but this is a narrative-driven league, and sports are all about getting excited and probably overexcited. So right now this is exactly what we're hoping for at this date.
Absolutely. And I feel like that is enough to get excited as a fan. Like, this is exactly what I was hoping would happen, and it happened. So, like, if I had a checklist of how I wanted the offseason to go, number one is, like, I want to hear in the spring that Malik Neighbors looks good. Check. It doesn't change what I think, just like you said. It doesn't change my expectations of him, but I wanted to see that box checked. It would have been disappointing to be like, well, kind of uneventful, but hey, it doesn't matter. It's just May and June. You know what I mean?
I'll tell you one thing. We have training camp coming up in about a little over a month, 5-6 weeks. Now there's something that when I say, hey, Grump, I got tickets for Thursday's practice, we're going to be excited about going.
Absolutely.
Before it's like, okay, we're following this as two guys on a schmucky little podcast and just taking notes. Now it's like, I really want to see something.
Right.
And this is what, more so even than the Waller. Because the Waller, again, we talked about a little while ago, is just kind of like he's an older guy. He's not really one of us. This is a potential franchise guy that is the guy that most people you might see, 20% of the jerseys at MetLife in 3 years wearing his jersey. And if he's not a dick like OBJ was, everybody will like him.
Yeah, exactly. And there's something about homegrown talent. Like a Darren Waller, if he had stayed here and earned a second contract with the team or something, that's all well and good, but it's still not the same as drafting a guy. Like, when you draft a guy that's really good, you get the sense that, like, hey, we're going to re-sign this dude, and he's going to be here. Like, there's a chance this dude could be a Giant for life. Like, that's a totally different thing.
Just look up at the Ring of Honor and look at those names. Of even, like, the recent guys that, going from LT, Harry Carson, and even to guys like OC, Tiki Barber, all of these guys, they were all drafted by the Giants. None of those guys are trades. None of those guys are free agents. They were all, I think, OJ Anderson.
Now, Eli Manning was, in fact, a trade.
Fine. He was a trade.
I'm just going to be a dick. I'm sorry. No,
yeah,
but you're making my point, so I'll take that back.
I mean, the guys that, this fan base always will go back to. Phil Simms, drafted by by this team. But there's a guy like Kerry Collins who took this team to a Super Bowl. Is he thought up as a, not really.
No.
Even some of like the really good role pieces on these different teams, like, they're not really thought of as, they're not guys that when they walk into a restaurant in Midtown, they're not paying for their dinner. They're not walking in and they're getting, claps and stuff, or people at least looking at them. So, yeah. And also, it's just, as your roster building, it's easier to build a roster with homegrown guys and having to pay to bring people in.
So that's going to do it for this one. I know, short episode, but it is this summer. There is not that much to talk about. Tomorrow, as you're listening to this today, mandatory minicamp has just started. It's Tuesday and Wednesday, and then we wrap until training camp. So we will have pens and pencils coming up over the next couple of weeks, which is one of our favorite things. We have 2 very special episodes that are going to be kind of bonus episodes coming up over the next couple, over the next month. Before training camp starts, and then we get right into training camp stuff in like mid-July into August. And
yeah, with the schedule, I guess, with only 3 preseason games, they start a week later so maybe they move things up a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, but as always, follow us on Twitter at @football_grump, at the Cranky Fan. Follow the show at Just Giants Pod. Be sure to subscribe and find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and of course YouTube. All right, until next time, go Giants.